Welcome back to Cozy Side Audio. Tonight's story is soft, slow, and written from the heart. Perfect for those quiet hours. If it touches you, please like, share it with someone special, and subscribe for more gentle moments. Let's begin the story. Cozy Side Audio presents Through Quiet Years. Chapter 1. The Space Between Words. The first day of junior year always carried a certain weight. For most people at Ridgewood High, it was about who had grown taller, who cut their hair, who came back from summer vacation looking like they'd reinvented themselves. For Olivia James, it was about who needed defending first. Not that she walked into school itching for a fight. It wasn't like that. But Olivia had always had this radar for weakness, a gut sense of when someone was about to be targeted. She didn't ignore it the way most people did. She couldn't. That was why she glanced sideways that morning, weaving through the crowded hallway with her backpack slung over one shoulder, and found David Rice keeping his eyes firmly on the ground. David always looked like he was trying to fold himself smaller, like if he could just shrink enough, he'd slip between the cracks of the linoleum and disappear. His headphones were around his neck, but not on, his dark hair falling forward so it shielded half his face. He moved quietly, as if apologizing for taking up space. And Olivia, as always, fell into step beside him. "Welcome back to Ridgewood," she said, her voice bright. "Another year of fluorescent lights and mystery meat." David's mouth tugged into the barest hint of a smile. That was how it always started with him. A fraction of a reaction, so small most people wouldn't notice. Olivia had trained herself too. "Thought we were done with cafeteria meat jokes," he said softly. His voice was low, careful, like it wasn't sure if it belonged in the noise of the hallway. "We'll never be done," she replied. "Some things are eternal, like death, taxes, and the way sophomore boys think spraying Axe is a substitute for showering." That got him. The corner of his mouth turned up just a little higher, and for Olivia, it counted as a win. Homeroom was chaos. Someone was already blasting music off their phone, backpacks thudding against desks. Olivia took her usual spot near the window, tossing her bag down with casual confidence. David slid into the desk beside hers, like he always had, as if the space was reserved only for him. "Think this year will be different?" she asked, flipping her notebook open and doodling absently in the margin. David didn't answer right away. He rarely did. He picked at the spiral binding of his notebook, eyes fixed somewhere past the whiteboard. "Different how?" "I don't know. Better? Less boring? More dramatic? Something worth writing about in college essays later instead of I existed, and algebra was hard." His brow furrowed like he was actually considering it. "I think it'll be the same," he said finally. "People don't change just because summer ends." Olivia rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. "God, you're such an optimist." "I'm a realist." "Same thing, except your version is depressing." By third period, the old rhythms had already returned. The same kids claimed the same seats in the cafeteria. The same teachers repeated the same first-day speeches about participation and respect. Olivia moved through it with practiced ease, laughing at jokes, raising her hand just enough to look smart but not like a try-hard. David, meanwhile, drifted through the background. He ate a sandwich quietly while other kids jostled past. He kept his gaze down during class discussions, even when Olivia knew he knew the answer. And like clockwork, it happened. It always happened. At lunch, one of the basketball guys, Kyle, tall, smug, always with the crowd behind him, stopped by their table. His voice carried easily, designed to draw attention. "Rice," Kyle said, "didn't know ghosts got a lunch period." The kids around him chuckled. David stiffened but didn't look up. Olivia set her water bottle down slowly, deliberately. "Didn't know clowns were allowed to leave the circus," she shot back. Kyle grinned like he'd been waiting for it. "You always got his back, huh, James? What, he your charity case or something?" Something in David's shoulders flinched, just barely. Olivia felt her stomach twist hot. "Or maybe," Kyle continued, dragging it out, "you're just waiting for him to say something, which would be like historic." "Funny," Olivia said coolly. The only historic thing here is your GPA. The laughter turned. A couple kids snorted, hiding their smiles. Kyle's smirk faltered for a second before he scoffed and wandered off, muttering something under his breath. His entourage followed. Olivia exhaled slowly, picking her sandwich back up. David stared at the table, his fingers tightening around his headphones. "You didn't have to," he murmured. "Yeah, I did. I'm fine, Liv." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "If you're fine, then I'm the Queen of England." He said nothing, only tugged his headphones on and let the conversation die. Olivia watched him, her irritation softening into something else. Concern, maybe. Frustration. The space between the two. After school, the sun blazed across the parking lot, the air thick with late summer heat. Olivia and David walked home together like they always had, backpacks dragging on their shoulders, sneakers scuffing the sidewalk. "You know," Olivia said after a while, "you could try fighting back once in a while." David kept his gaze straight ahead. "Not my style." "Yeah, well, your style sucks." That made him laugh, a quick breath of sound that disappeared almost as soon as it came. But it was real. "I don't need saving," he said quietly. "Too bad," she replied, nudging his shoulder with hers. "I'm gonna do it anyway." For a few steps, neither of them spoke. The cicadas hummed loud in the trees. Cars whooshed past. The silence between them wasn't awkward, though. It never was. David finally said, "You ever think about just leaving it alone? Letting people say what they want?" "All the time," Olivia admitted. Then she looked at him, her expression softening. "And then I look at you, and I remember why I don't." David's throat bobbed as if he were swallowing words that didn't make it out. He glanced down, hair falling forward, but she didn't push. She never did. That night, Olivia sprawled on her bed, phone glowing in her hand. Her group chat with the girls from soccer buzzed nonstop with talk of tryouts, who hooked up with who over the summer, which teachers were already giving too much homework. But her attention kept drifting to the other chat. The one that mattered. David. "Homework already sucks." Olivia. "It's day 1. David. "Still true." Olivia. "Fine. But if you think I'm letting you hide behind your headphones all year, you're wrong." There was a pause. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared again. David. "Not hiding, just listening." Olivia. "Same thing." David. "You don't get it." Olivia. "Then explain." No reply came for a long time. Olivia stared at the screen until her eyes burned, waiting. But eventually, the dots vanished for good. She sighed, tossing her phone aside and staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. David was wrong about one thing. She did get it. She got him, maybe better than he got himself. And if that meant protecting him from idiots like Kyle, then she'd do it every day, all year long as it took. By morning, the world would reset. Lockers slamming, teachers droning, whispers chasing down the hallways. David would shrink into himself. Olivia would throw herself between him and the noise, and the cycle would keep spinning. But somewhere under it all, deep and quiet, something had already begun to shift. Neither of them knew it yet. But they would. Chapter 2. Static between stations. By the second day of junior year, Olivia James already had her calendar filling up. Soccer tryouts were Friday. The first student council meeting was the following week. And her phone buzzed almost constantly with texts she half paid attention to. People wanted her on their team projects, wanted to sit at her table, wanted her opinion on what color posters should be for the fall carnival. It wasn't that she went out of her way to be popular. It was just that Olivia had a knack for making space for herself. Loud enough to be heard, quick enough with a comeback that people thought twice before messing with her. David Rice walked beside her in the hallway like he was trying to blend into the paint on the walls. Olivia had stopped questioning the contrast years ago. It didn't matter that she was the one who spoke too loud and he was the one who barely spoke at all. They fit somehow, like puzzle pieces that shouldn't go together but did. English class was first period, and Olivia was already half asleep by the time Mr. Carter started droning about summer reading. She doodled spirals in her notebook, her chin resting on her palm. Beside her, David was taking notes in neat, tiny handwriting. Of course he was. He always listened, even when no one else did. "You could just copy mine," he murmured without looking up. Olivia smirked. "I'd never cheat off you. That's like sacrilege. You've done it before. Borrowing a vocab definition doesn't count as cheating." His lips twitched, almost a smile, but he kept writing. Olivia leaned back in her chair, studying him out of the corner of her eye. How he stayed so calm in a room full of noise amazed her, like he had some secret world in his head where none of this mattered. At lunch, Olivia's table was more crowded than usual. A couple of new soccer freshmen had squeezed in, wide-eyed and eager. Someone passed around a bag of chips. Conversation bounced from one end to the other. David sat quietly, earbuds in but not playing anything, chewing his sandwich like he was counting each bite. Olivia kept one ear tuned to the chatter, the other to him. When one of the freshmen asked who the best player on the team was, someone immediately pointed at Olivia. "James, easy," another girl laughed. "She carried us last season." Olivia rolled her eyes. "It's a team sport, remember?" "Still," the freshman said, "everyone knows you're the star." David shifted slightly, his gaze dropping to the table. His hands fidgeted with the cord of his headphones, winding and unwinding it. Olivia caught it instantly. The way his shoulders tensed, the way he tried to disappear. Before she could say anything, someone else leaned over. "How come you always sit with him?" a boy asked, jerking his chin toward David. "Not mean exactly, just curious. Careless?" Olivia's jaw tightened. "Because he's my friend," she said simply. The boy shrugged, unimpressed, and the conversation drifted elsewhere. But Olivia kept glancing at David, who never looked up. After school, Olivia had soccer practice. The field was buzzing with energy, freshmen tripping over their cleats, upperclassmen stretching lazily in the sun. David sat in the bleachers with his headphones on, notebook open on his lap. He always waited, no matter how long practice ran. Olivia pretended she didn't notice most days, but she always did. She jogged over during a water break, breathless, grass sticking to her shins. "You know you don't have to wait every time," she said, grabbing her water bottle. David looked up, blinking against the sunlight. "I don't mind." "It's boring." "I like boring." Olivia laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." He looked back down at his notebook, but not before she caught the faintest smile tugging at his mouth. Walking home, the air sticky with late afternoon heat, Olivia nudged him with her elbow. "So what were you writing during practice? Song lyrics? Secret diary?" "Nothing." "Liar." David exhaled, pulling his headphones down around his neck. "Just stuff." "Deep stuff?" "Not really." "You're the worst at lying." He didn't answer. They passed a row of houses with sprinklers hissing, water glinting in the sunlight. Olivia watched him shove his hands deeper into his pockets, his shoulders hunched. "You know," she said, softer this time, "you could let me in sometimes." He glanced at her, then away. "You're already in more than anyone else." The words landed heavier than he probably meant them to. Olivia felt her chest tighten, her usual snappy comeback drying up. For once, she had nothing to say. That night, her phone buzzed again. "Olivia, you sure you're okay?" It took him a minute. "David, I'm fine." "Olivia, you always say that." "David, because it's true." She stared at the screen, frowning. Something about the way he wrote it didn't feel true at all. "Olivia, you know I'd notice if it wasn't." No reply came. Olivia tossed the phone onto her nightstand, pulling the blanket over her head. For the first time, she wondered if maybe David's silence wasn't just who he was. Maybe it was something heavier, something he didn't want to share. And maybe, just maybe, that was what scared her most. By the end of the week, tryouts would be over, classes would settle, routines would lock in. Everything would look normal from the outside. But beneath it all, Olivia could already feel the static, the kind that hums in the silence, waiting for the dial to shift just enough to catch a different station. Chapter 3. The Edges of Quiet. The thing about the third day of school was that everyone already acted like they'd been there forever. The freshness of new notebooks and sharpened pencils wore off. The gossip about who kissed who at the lake in July had already made the rounds twice. By then, Ridgewood High was running on routine. Olivia James thrived in routine. She knew which hallways clogged between periods, which teachers checked homework religiously, which vending machine ate your quarters without apology. It was her world, loud and buzzing and full of people. David Rice moved through it like he was allergic to attention. Walking into chemistry that morning, Olivia could already tell something was off. David slipped into his seat without looking at her, sliding his notebook out with a precision that seemed almost too careful. His headphones dangled from his pocket, the cord twisted tight like he'd wound it around his fingers too many times. "You okay?" she asked, lowering her voice so it didn't carry. "Yeah," he said, flat, automatic. Olivia leaned back in her chair, narrowing her eyes. "Convincing?" He didn't respond, eyes fixed on the periodic table poster like it might reveal the secrets of the universe. Lab partners were assigned, and of course, Olivia and David ended up together. They always did. She didn't know if it was coincidence or if teachers just assumed they were a package deal. Either way, she didn't complain. "Beaker," Olivia said, sliding one toward him. David adjusted it without a word, measuring liquid with steady hands. He was good at this. Calm, precise. Meanwhile, Olivia scribbled notes messily, her handwriting leaning sideways across the page. "You'd be screwed without me," she muttered playfully. David's lips twitched. "Other way around." The exchange was simple, fleeting, but it settled something in her chest. They didn't need to fill the silence the way other people did. A couple words were enough. Still, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting under the surface. At lunch, the cafeteria buzzed with noise, as usual. Olivia slid into her spot, dumping her tray down, immediately pulled into conversation about soccer tryouts. David sat beside her, unwrapping his sandwich with the kind of focus that made it seem like he wasn't listening. But Olivia knew better. He always listened. "Liv, you're basically guaranteed captain," one of the girls said. Olivia shrugged, popping a grape into her mouth. "It's not official until coach says it." "Please, you're already the face of the team." Olivia laughed, shaking her head. But her eyes flicked to David, who was staring down at his food. His shoulders were tense, his movement sharper than usual. Later, as they walked out of the cafeteria, she nudged him. "You're quiet today." He gave her a look that said, "Really?" but didn't answer. "More quiet than normal," she pressed. He sighed, tugging his hoodie sleeve down over his hand. "Just tired." Liar. David didn't argue. Practice that afternoon was brutal. The sun beat down, the drills endless, coach yelling encouragement one second and criticism the next. Olivia pushed through, legs burning, sweat dripping into her eyes. She lived for it. The ache, the rush, the way the world narrowed to nothing but the ball at her feet. From the bleachers, David watched. He always did, notebook open, headphones around his neck. To anyone else, he probably looked bored. Olivia knew better. He saw everything. When practice ended, she jogged over, grass sticking to her socks. "You look like you're about to pass out just from sitting," she teased, grabbing her water bottle. David raised an eyebrow. "You look like you ran through a hurricane." "Thanks, real supportive." His mouth curved just slightly. "You're good, you know that, right?" Olivia blinked, caught off guard. Compliments from David were rare, almost non-existent. When they came, they felt heavier, truer. "Yeah, well," she said, trying to play it off. "Someone's got to keep Ridgewood from embarrassing itself." But the word stayed with her all the way home. That night, Olivia sprawled across her bed, scrolling through group texts, ignoring half the notifications. Her phone buzzed with a new message, and her heart did that stupid little flip when she saw the name. "David, sorry if I was weird today." "Olivia, you're always weird." A pause. David, seriously. Olivia, I know, it's fine. Another pause. Longer this time. And, David, you ever feel like you don't deserve something? Olivia sat up, frowning. Olivia, like what? David, just people, things, whatever. Olivia, okay, that's way too vague. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. David, never mind. Olivia stared at the screen, frustration bubbling in her chest. He always did this. Pulled back right when he started to open up. Olivia, you're not allowed to never mind me. No response came. The next morning, Olivia spotted him at his locker, headphones already on, shoulders hunched. She leaned against the neighboring locker, crossing her arms. You gonna tell me what that text was about? She asked. David shook his head. Forget it. Not a chance. Olivia. His tone was sharper than usual, enough to make her blink. Just drop it, okay? For a second, they stood there in the crowded hallway, the noise of other students rushing around them. It was rare for David to snap. Rarer still for him to look at her like he wanted her to back off. Olivia swallowed the dozen retorts that came to mind. Instead, she forced a small smile. Fine, for now. She walked away before he could see how much it stung. That evening, she sat in her room, soccer bag dumped on the floor, the faint sound of her brother's video game in the next room. Her phone was silent. No texts. No apology. For the first time in years, Olivia felt a crack in the space between them. A tiny one, maybe, but it was there. And she hated it. The days ahead would blur with practices, classes, homework, and laughter. From the outside, everything looked the same. Olivia loud and bright, David quiet and steady. But under it all, something was shifting. David carried the guilt like a stone in his pocket, heavy and constant. Olivia carried the worry, sharp and restless. Neither of them said it. Not yet. But soon, the silence would say it for them. Chapter 4. Between the notes, the afternoon light slanted across the school parking lot, painting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Olivia leaned against the hood of her car, a beat-up Corolla her uncle had sold her for cheap, and tapped the side with her fingernail while waiting for David. He always took a little longer after last period. His locker was buried in one of the quieter hallways, tucked far from the chaos, and he didn't like to rush. Finally, he appeared. Backpack slung low, earbuds dangling around his neck like a half-kept secret. Olivia raised a hand, her grin automatic. Took you long enough, she teased. He glanced up, gave the smallest shrug, and walked over. Locker door jammed. She smirked. Or maybe you just move at the speed of a sloth. David didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth twitched like he was holding back a smile. That was the thing about him. His expressions were quiet, almost invisible to everyone else, but Olivia had learned to read them like sheet music. Come on, she said, pushing off the car. We've got practice. She meant soccer. Olivia played center mid, captain of the team, and she took it seriously. But David never minded waiting for her. He'd sit with his notebook in the bleachers, sketching in tiny strokes that made no sense to anyone else but him. When people asked why he came to every practice, Olivia just said, because he wants to, in that final tone that dared anyone to challenge it. Now, as they crossed the lot together, she noticed he was dragging his feet more than usual. You okay? She asked. He adjusted the strap on his backpack, eyes on the ground. Yeah, just tired. It was believable. He always looked a little tired, but there was something about the way he said it that made her narrow her eyes. She wanted to press, but she let it go. For now. The soccer field was buzzing with energy by the time they arrived. Olivia jogged to the locker room, pulling her hair into a ponytail, while David climbed the bleachers with his headphones in hand. She glanced back once before disappearing inside, just long enough to see him slide into his usual seat at the very top row, notebook open across his lap. Practice was long and grueling. Coach had them running drills until Olivia's legs burned, but she never slowed down. She couldn't. Her team looked up to her, and she thrived on that unspoken expectation. By the end, her shirt clung with sweat, her lungs felt scorched, and she loved every second of it. When practice ended, twilight had fallen, the field lights buzzing overhead. Olivia trotted toward the bleachers, waving her teammates off one by one. David was still there, his notebook closed now, headphones on. His head bobbed slightly to whatever he was listening to. "You'd think you were the one practicing," Olivia said, plopping down beside him, still breathless. He pulled off one earbud. "What?" "You look exhausted." He gave a small shrug. "Maybe I am." She nudged his shoulder with hers. "What were you even listening to?" He hesitated, then handed her the headphones. Olivia slipped one in, and a wave of soft piano chords drifted through. It was quiet, steady, like rain falling on windows. "This is so you," she said, smiling. "Melancholy, but in a pretty way." David looked down at his shoes. "Guess so." They sat there in silence for a while, listening. The field emptied, the night crept in, and Olivia found herself studying him out of the corner of her eye. The slope of his shoulders, the way his hair curled at the edges, the faraway look he got whenever music played. It was a side of him most people never saw. And for some reason, she felt protective of that. Later that week, it happened. The bullying was nothing new. Olivia had seen David shoved into lockers, called names, mocked for being quiet. Usually she was there to cut it off before it got too far. But that Thursday, she had a student council meeting that ran late. By the time she found him in the hallway, his back was against the wall, 3 boys towering over him. One of them flicked David's headphones. "What's this crap? You listening to lullabies again?" Olivia didn't think. She stormed forward, voice sharp. "Hey, leave him alone." The boys turned, smirking, but Olivia's glare was a weapon. "Go, now." They muttered something under their breath but backed off. David's eyes stayed on the floor. "Are you okay?" she asked softly once they were gone. He nodded, but she could see the tightness in his jaw. "Don't let them get to you," she said. "They're idiots." But he didn't answer. Instead, he pulled his headphones over his ears and walked away. Olivia stood there, confused, a strange ache blooming in her chest. That night, David didn't answer her texts. It wasn't unusual for him to go quiet, but something about it felt different, like a door had been shut. Olivia lay in bed staring at her phone, scrolling back through their conversation history. Hundreds of little exchanges, inside jokes, random links, song recommendations. He'd never gone more than a few hours without replying. She tried again. "Hey, just checking in. You good?" No answer. Olivia sighed, tossing her phone aside. She didn't like the feeling gnawing at her. It wasn't just worry. It was something else. Something she couldn't quite name. Friday morning, David was at his locker when she found him. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied, voice quiet. "Why didn't you answer my texts?" He adjusted his backpack. "Didn't feel like talking." Olivia blinked. "Okay, are you mad at me?" "No." "Then what is it?" He closed his locker slowly, like he was buying time. "You don't have to keep saving me, Liv." The words caught her off guard. "I'm not," she started, but he cut her off. "You are, and I don't want you to anymore." She stared at him, stunned. "David, I'm not going to just stand by while people treat you like—" "I can handle it." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight she wasn't used to hearing from him. And then, without waiting for her response, he walked away. Olivia stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding, 100 things she wanted to say tangled on her tongue. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was losing him. Chapter 5. The Distance Between Us. By the time the next week rolled around, Olivia noticed something had shifted with David. It wasn't obvious at first. He was still in his seat beside her in English, still there at their locker after third period, still walking with her to the corner where she caught her bus. But there was this muted quality to him, like someone had taken all the brightness out of his voice and dimmed it just enough that only she could notice. David had always been quiet, but this wasn't just his usual quiet. This was him slipping into himself, pulling away from things. She caught him tugging his headphones over his ears more often, staring at his notebook instead of joining in when she said something. When she nudged him for a response, he gave her half smiles that didn't quite meet his eyes. It gnawed at her because she knew him too well to miss it. David didn't always speak out loud, but his silence had tones. This one was heavy, almost guilty. At lunch, she leaned across the table and lowered her voice. "Okay, what's going on?" He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "You've been off all week. Don't tell me you're fine because I know when you're not." David toyed with the strap of his backpack, avoiding her gaze. "I'm just tired." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Uh-huh. Tired, but suddenly living inside your headphones and avoiding actual conversation with me?" His lips pressed together, and for a moment she thought he might say something. But instead, he shrugged. "It's nothing." The worst part was the way he said it. Not defensive, not dismissive, just resigned. Like whatever he was carrying, he'd already decided not to share it. Olivia's stomach twisted. Whoa. The truth was, David had been unraveling under the weight of something he couldn't bring himself to voice. Every time Olivia jumped in front of a snide comment or shoved someone's hand off his shoulder, he felt a knot tighten in his chest. At first, he'd been grateful. How could he not? She was the only reason some of those guys hadn't made his life hell on a daily basis. But lately, the gratitude had started to sour into guilt. He couldn't stop hearing the whispers when Olivia walked away from him at the end of the day. She could do so much better than hanging with him. Why does she waste her time with Rice? Probably just feels sorry for him. The thing was, David couldn't disagree with them. She shone wherever she went, effortlessly sliding into conversations, making people laugh, commanding rooms like she was born to do it. And then there was him, stammering when called on, tripping over his own words when someone new tried to talk to him, always looking like he'd rather disappear than stand in the spotlight. The contrast between them was getting sharper every day, and David hated the thought that she was paying the price for staying by his side. That night, he pulled his hoodie over his head, plugged in his headphones, and turned the volume up until the music filled every corner of his mind. He told himself it was better this way. Better to start creating a little distance before she realized it herself and left him behind. Olivia noticed within days. David had stopped waiting for her by the lockers in the morning. He still walked beside her in class, but it was quieter than ever. His answers short, clipped, wrapped in his hoodie and his music. By Friday, she was seething. Not at him, but at whatever made him think this was okay. When the final bell rang, she followed him out the back doors. He tugged his hood tighter, earbuds still in like he was trying to make himself invisible. "David," she called. He didn't turn. "David." She jogged forward, reached out, and grabbed his sleeve. He stopped, startled, and tugged one earbud loose. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You've been acting like I don't even exist this week. Did I do something?" He shook his head quickly. "No, you didn't. It's not that." "Then what?" His eyes darted away, searching the cracked pavement like it might give him an escape. I don't want to hold you back anymore." Her chest tightened. "Hold me back? What are you even talking about?" He exhaled, frustrated, and finally looked at her. You're good at everything. People like you. You can talk to anyone, you can just fit in wherever you go. And then there's me. Everyone knows you're always defending me, and it's..." He broke off and shaking his head. "I don't want to be the reason you miss out on things." The words hit Olivia like a slap. For a second, she just stared at him, trying to process that he'd actually been carrying this around. "You think I care what people say?" she asked finally, her voice low but sharp. David's expression faltered. "I just don't want you to get dragged down because of me." "Dragged down?" Her throat felt tight. "David, you're not dragging me anywhere. You're my best friend. That's never been a burden." He flinched slightly at her intensity, and Olivia softened her tone. "If you're hurting, you're supposed to let me in, not push me away." His gaze flickered, conflicted, before he finally shook his head and tugged his other earbud back in. And then he walked off, leaving Olivia standing there, furious and hurt, but more determined than ever not to let him disappear from her life. That night, Olivia lay awake in bed, staring at the glow of her phone screen. Her text to him sat unanswered. "You don't get to decide that you're holding me back. I'm not letting you go that easily." She hated the silence that followed. But if David thought she was just going to let him drift away, he clearly didn't know her as well as he thought. Because Olivia James didn't back down. Not from bullies, not from rumors, and definitely not from her best friend. And she wasn't about to start now. Chapter 6. Shadows in the Hallway. Olivia noticed the distance first in the little things. David's empty chair at their lunch table. The way he started cutting through side doors at school instead of walking the long hallway where she usually waited. The fact that his headphones seemed to be glued on now, volume up so loud she could hear faint drum beats when she passed him. He wasn't looking at her anymore. At first, she tried to pretend it was nothing. Maybe he was just tired, maybe homework had swallowed him alive, but excuses crumbled quickly when he ducked away again, barely even nodding when she caught his sleeve. "Hey, you've been disappearing a lot lately," she said one afternoon, jogging a few steps to match his pace as they left history. David tugged his hood higher. "Just busy." "With what? You're not even answering texts anymore." He shrugged, as if his silence was a full answer. By the time Olivia blinked, he'd already slipped his headphones back on and blended into the crowd of students spilling outside. That night, she typed 3 different messages to him, each one shorter and sharper than the last, but ended up leaving them in drafts. She couldn't bring herself to send them, not when it felt like he'd already decided to shut her out. The following week made everything worse. She spotted him alone under the stairwell during lunch, hunched over with his music. A couple of guys walked past, snickering. One of them said something. Olivia didn't catch the words, but she saw the way David's shoulders stiffened. She was halfway across the room before she even thought about it. "Seriously?" she snapped at the two. "Find a new hobby." They rolled their eyes and kept moving, muttering under their breath. Olivia turned to David, ready to sit down next to him, but he held up a hand. "Don't." The single word froze her in place. "I don't need you fighting for me," he said flatly, staring at the scuffed floor tiles instead of her. Olivia's throat went tight. "I wasn't. Yes, you were. Just don't." She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't have to deal with that garbage alone, but the way he wouldn't meet her eyes made her stop. He wasn't just brushing her off, he was building a wall brick by brick. So she stood there for a moment, her hands tightening around the strap of her bag, before walking away. Days blurred into a loop of missed glances and swallowed words. Olivia still waited in the hallway where they used to walk home together, but David never showed. She still left the end seat open at lunch, but he never sat. She still passed his locker, hoping for even a smile, but the headphones were always there, louder than ever. It wasn't anger that pressed down on her. It was something heavier, something she didn't have a name for. Every time she thought of him sitting alone, she felt her chest ache like she was the one being left behind, not him. Late at night, lying in bed, she'd stare at the glow of her phone screen, their message thread still pinned at the top. Every blue bubble was hers. Every gap where his replies should have been looked like silence in physical form. And yet she couldn't let herself believe this was it. She'd known him too long, too well. There had to be a reason. She just didn't know if he'd ever let her hear it. Chapter 7. What he can't say. David had gotten good at disappearing. Keep your hood up, headphones on, move fast, don't make eye contact. At school, it was almost a second skin now. The truth was, it wasn't Olivia he was avoiding. It was himself. Every time she looked at him with that stubborn light in her eyes, like she'd fight the world if it meant keeping him okay, something twisted in his chest. She didn't see him as the person he thought he was. She saw more, too much, and he couldn't handle it. He knew she thought the silence meant nothing, or that he was just tired. He wished that were true. It would have been easier if it was, but what he couldn't say, what he couldn't even let himself think sometimes, was that being near her felt dangerous. Not because of her, but because of how much she meant to him. He wasn't supposed to need anyone like that. He sat in the back of English class, pretending to take notes while his brain reeled in circles. The teacher's voice was just background noise. He thought about the way Olivia had stepped in front of those guys in the cafeteria. The way her voice had cracked with heat when she told them off. The way she'd looked at him afterward, like she wasn't scared at all of what people thought, only about what he might be feeling. And it hurt. It actually hurt. Because she deserved someone who'd stand tall beside her, not someone who was barely holding himself together most days. By the time the bell rang, he couldn't remember a single thing from class. He left fast, weaving through the hall to avoid her usual waiting spot. He almost made it, until he heard her voice behind him. "David, stop." Something in her tone made his steps falter. He didn't turn, but he felt her come up beside him. "You don't get to just disappear on me," she said, softer this time. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the lockers ahead. If he looked at her, he knew he'd break. "Olivia, just leave it alone." "Why? We've been friends forever, and now you won't even talk to me? You can't just shut me out like that." He clenched his jaw. The words he wanted to say burned at the back of his throat. "I'm not shutting you out. I'm trying to protect you from me. I'm trying to stop myself from ruining this before it even has a chance." But all that came out was, "You don't get it." Her silence lasted just long enough to sting. Then she said, "Then explain it to me." And for a second, he almost did. He almost laid everything bare right there in the hallway. But the thought of her looking at him differently afterward, of breaking the one safe thing he had, was too much. So he shook his head. "I can't." When he finally looked over, her expression stopped him cold. She wasn't angry. She just looked hurt, like he'd slammed a door in her face. And maybe he had. She walked away first this time, her shoulders stiff as she blended into the crowd. David stood frozen, headphones limp around his neck, feeling like he'd managed to push away the only person who still cared enough to fight for him. That night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice over and over. "You can't just shut me out." He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes, wishing he could erase the sound. But the truth was, he didn't want to forget. He just didn't know how to let her stay without breaking everything. Chapter 8. The quiet between them. The cafeteria had never felt louder. Every laugh, every scrape of a chair, every shouted joke from across the tables seemed amplified against the silence at hers. Olivia sat with her tray untouched, stirring the mashed potatoes into a spiral with her fork. Across the room, David sat 2 tables over with a couple of guys from his science class. People he never used to sit with. He wasn't talking much, but he was there, and not here, and that was enough to make her chest ache. For years, there'd been a kind of invisible tether between them. Even when they weren't side by side, they were aware of each other. Little nods, inside jokes mouthed across the hall, texts that came at the exact right moment. Now that tether felt like it had snapped, and she was left holding a frayed end. She stabbed her potatoes harder than she meant to. After lunch, she caught him at his locker. Or tried to. "Hey," she said, her voice low but steady. He didn't look up right away, just shuffled his books with an exaggerated calm that made her want to scream. "Zit, David." Finally, he glanced at her, expression unreadable. "What?" The single word was a blade. Not cruel, not sharp in tone, just flat. Dull. Like she didn't matter enough for him to summon emotion. Her throat tightened. "Are we really going to keep doing this? Pretend like I'm not even—" "Liv," he interrupted, shutting his locker with a metallic slam. "Just let it go, okay?" Let it go. Like it was a game she was playing. Like all the years of friendship, the nights they stayed up talking, the way she had his back no matter what. It all meant nothing. She wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he came to his senses. But the way he wouldn't meet her eyes told her it wouldn't matter. Not right now. So she let him walk away. And the hollow space he left behind followed her through the rest of the day. Nights were the hardest. Olivia lay on her bed, phone screen lighting up her face as she scrolled through their old messages. Inside jokes about teachers, half-finished memes, his random midnight rants about whatever book he was reading. She'd forgotten how often he reached out first, how much he used to need her. Her thumb hovered over his name in her contacts. She typed, "Can we please just talk?" Her finger trembled over the send button. Then, with a groan, she deleted the draft and tossed her phone onto the pillow beside her. If he wanted space, fine. She could give him that. She just hated how space felt like losing him piece by piece. At school, the distance grew roots. Weeks blurred together. She'd catch glimpses of him laughing lightly at something someone else said, and it would cut deeper than outright rejection. He wasn't miserable, at least not outwardly. He was just different. Different without her. Friends started to notice. "Did you two have a fight or something?" Mia asked one afternoon in the locker room. Olivia yanked her sweatshirt over her head, avoiding her friend's gaze. "Not really, She trailed off. How was she supposed to explain something that wasn't even words, just silence and walls? Mia raised a brow but didn't press. Later, sitting through math class, Olivia found herself sketching absent-minded circles in the margins of her notes. Every loop ended up looking like a tether, a thread, something fraying. She ripped the page out before the bell, crumpled it into her pocket. It wasn't until a Friday night, rain streaking her window, the whole house quiet, that the weight of it broke her open. She curled up under her blanket and whispered to the dark, "I miss you." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated that there was no one to hear it but the walls. Across town, David lay awake too, staring at his ceiling with his headphones silent around his neck. He hadn't listened to music in days. Every song reminded him of her favorite chorus, her humming under her breath when she thought no one was listening. He squeezed his eyes shut. He was doing the right thing, wasn't he? Keeping distance, protecting her from the mess in his head. So why did it feel like tearing out a piece of himself every time he walked away? Chapter 9. Pressure Points. The basketball game wasn't supposed to feel like this. The gym was packed, voices echoing off the high ceiling, sneakers squeaking against polished wood. Olivia sat on the bleachers with Mia and the others, pretending to care about the scoreboard, but her eyes drifted constantly. 2 rows down, David sat hunched over, arms crossed, face shadowed by the bright overhead lights. He hadn't so much as glanced back at her. She hated how natural it looked now. This distance, like they'd rehearsed it. Like the world had decided this was the new script and they were both playing along. Mia nudged her. "You okay? You've been staring holes into the back of his head." Olivia forced a laugh, just zoning out. But the truth pressed down heavy on her chest. She couldn't even remember the last time she and David had talked about something real. Not just clipped words in the hallway, not just silence. Something real. The buzzer blared, signaling halftime. The crowd spilled out into the hallways for snacks and air. Olivia stood, but before she could stop herself, her feet carried her down the steps, toward him. "David." Her voice barely cut through the chatter, but he heard. He stiffened, then turned, eyes guarded. "Can we talk? Just for a minute." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Live, not here." "Then where?" she shot back, surprising herself with the sharpness in her tone. "Because I've been waiting, and you keep shutting me out. Do you even realize how much that—" "Olivia," he snapped, louder this time. Heads turned, heat flooded her face. His jaw clenched. He lowered his voice. "Not here." Then he pushed past her, disappearing into the stream of students. She stood frozen, pulse pounding, the sound of laughter and footsteps rushing around her like a current she couldn't fight against. By Monday, the sting hadn't faded. If anything, it had settled deeper. She sat in English, staring at the page of her notebook, words blurring together. Every few seconds, her pen tapped against the paper, but she couldn't string her thoughts into anything coherent. "Miss Hart?" The teacher's voice cut in. "Do you have an answer?" Her head snapped up, cheeks burning. She hadn't even heard the question. "No, sorry," she muttered. The teacher moved on, but Olivia felt the burn of embarrassment crawl up her neck. She risked a glance sideways. David was 2 rows over. He hadn't looked up. Of course he hadn't. That night, she pulled on her hoodie and slipped outside. The air was crisp, the kind that made her breath fog. She shoved her hands deep into her pockets and walked aimlessly around the block, past glowing windows where families sat down for dinner, past the corner store where she and David used to buy slushies in the summer. Her feet carried her toward the park before she realized it. The swings were empty, chains swaying gently in the breeze. She sat on one, rocking back and forth, staring up at the stars half hidden by streetlights. She remembered a night last year when she and David had been here, lying in the grass, arguing about which constellation looked most like a lopsided triangle. She'd laughed until her stomach hurt. Now the memory felt like it belonged to someone else. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. For a second, her heart leapt. Maybe it was him. It wasn't. Just Mia asking if she was coming to the study session tomorrow. She didn't reply. Meanwhile, David sat at his desk, his notebook open but blank. He'd been staring at the page for almost an hour, pen resting useless in his hand. He thought about Olivia, how her voice had cracked when she asked, "Do you even realize how much that—" before he cut her off. The look on her face when he walked away haunted him, sharper than any guilt he'd known. But every time he thought about going back, about letting her in, the same fear tightened around his chest. If she knew the full mess of what was happening inside his head, maybe she wouldn't look at him the same. Maybe she'd walk away anyway. So he stayed silent. Again. Friday brought the first real crack. The history teacher announced a big group project, 2 partners graded together. The room buzzed with students shifting, calling names across the desks. "Let's be efficient," the teacher said. "I'll just go down the list and pair people." Olivia's heart sank as the names rolled on. Hart and Callahan. Her stomach twisted. Callahan, David. Her eyes darted across the room, finding him already staring at her. For the first time in weeks, their gazes locked. Neither of them looked away. Chapter 10. When silence sits between us. The library felt too quiet, even for a library. Stacks of history books sat untouched on the table between them, the assignment sheet half crumpled under Olivia's notebook. David had come in late, muttered something close to an apology, then sat down across from her. Now the two of them were locked in a standoff made of silence. Olivia tapped her pencil against the margin of her notes, a steady rhythm that made his jaw twitch. He scribbled something down. At least she thought he did. His handwriting was a mess, loops and sharp angles spilling across the page. Finally, she blurted, "We should at least pick a topic before the period ends." He didn't look up. The civil rights movement, it's broad enough. Her mouth opened, then closed. He wasn't wrong, but something in his tone, flat, like she was a stranger, made her chest ache. "Fine," she said, sharper than she meant. "Civil rights movement." He nodded once, like they'd just settled a business deal, then went back to writing. By the second meeting, the space between them felt heavier. Olivia tried to keep it professional. She brought articles, outlined a rough timeline, suggested splitting sections. David listened, but his responses stayed clipped, careful, like every word was measured against something she couldn't see. At one point, she looked up from her notes and caught him watching her. Not glaring, not blank, just watching, with something complicated in his eyes. But the second she noticed, he dropped his gaze. Her pencil slipped, leaving a dark streak across the page. She almost asked, "Why are you doing this?" but bit her tongue. It wasn't until the third meeting that things cracked. They'd been sitting in silence for nearly half an hour, both buried in separate stacks of research. Olivia's phone buzzed, a text from Mia. "How's it going with him? Surviving?" Olivia snorted under her breath, shaking her head. David glanced up. "What?" "Nothing," she muttered. He raised an eyebrow. "You laughed at nothing?" Her cheeks warmed. "Mia texted me, okay? She's checking in." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Of course she is." Something in his tone snapped her patience. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he said again, but this time his voice carried an edge. "No," she pressed. You don't get to do that. You don't get to shut me out and then act like this is fine. It's not fine, David. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Her hands shook where they gripped the notebook. His face tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd fire back. But he didn't. He just looked at her, eyes darker than she remembered, and said quietly, "You think I don't know that?" Her breath caught. The silence stretched between them again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence. This one buzzed, fragile, waiting for one of them to move. That night, Olivia lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her heart replayed his words. "You think I don't know that?" Over and over, like a record skipping. It wasn't an answer, but it wasn't nothing either. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she'd glimpsed a crack in his armor. But cracks didn't mean closeness. Cracks meant something was breaking. David didn't sleep much either. He sat at his desk again, same notebook open, same blank page. He thought about the way Olivia's voice had wavered, the way she demanded answers he couldn't give. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't trust himself to hand her the whole truth. Still, he couldn't shake the way her eyes looked when she said it's not fine, like she still cared, even if she hated herself for it. For the first time, he wondered if staying silent was really protecting her, or just protecting himself. The next afternoon, they met again in the library. The table was littered with papers and books, but neither touched them. Olivia finally spoke. "We're never going to finish this project if we keep pretending nothing's wrong." He stared at her, then let out a humorless laugh. "And what exactly do you think is wrong, Liv?" Her throat tightened. "You, me, us. Take your pick." For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his hand closed into a fist on top of the table. And he whispered, barely audible, "I don't know how to fix it." Her eyes stung, but she held his gaze. "Then stop pretending." The clock on the wall ticked loudly above them. For once, neither of them looked away. Chapter 11. The Edges of What We Don't Say. The school week dragged, every bell sounding heavier than the last. Olivia found herself counting hours until her next meeting with David, though she hated admitting it. Even to herself. When Friday afternoon finally came, the library felt different. The usual hum of students was gone, replaced by the muffled hush of a building ready for the weekend. It was just the two of them again, sitting across from each other, paper and pen between them like neutral ground. David had shown up first this time. His backpack sat half unzipped, books spilling out. When Olivia dropped her own onto the chair beside her, he didn't say hello, just gave a short nod. She took a breath. "Stop pretending, that's what you told him." "So don't." "I've been thinking," she said, tapping her pencil against the blank margin of her notes. "We should split the project by theme, not by timeline. You take protests, I'll take legislation." His gaze lifted. For a second, she braced for another clipped answer, but instead he said, "That works." Something about his voice, low even, not defensive, made her heart stutter. They worked for nearly half an hour without speaking, the quiet broken only by the rustle of paper and the squeak of pencils. At some point, Olivia leaned forward to grab a book and caught sight of his hands. The way his knuckles flexed when he turned a page. The way the vein ran up his forearm, pronounced under his skin. It was the kind of detail she shouldn't have noticed. Not anymore, but she did. When she glanced up, he was already watching her. Their eyes met, and for once, neither looked away. The air between them thickened, like the whole library had closed in around their table. Olivia swallowed hard, willing herself to break the moment. "You're quieter lately," she said, the words coming out softer than she meant. His expression flickered. "You wanted me quiet." Her chest tightened. "No, I wanted you honest." Something raw flashed across his face, gone as quickly as it came. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Honest," he repeated as if the word weighed more than he could carry. "I don't know if you want that." Olivia's throat burned. "Try me." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed his notebook, pressing a hand flat against the cover like he was holding something down. I've made mistakes, he said finally, his voice low. Ones I don't get to take back. And every time I look at you, I'm reminded of them. Her breath hitched. You think I don't already know that? He met her gaze, and this time there was no shield, no practiced detachment. Just tiredness. Guilt. Something else she didn't want to name. For a moment, Olivia thought he might say more, might finally spill whatever was lodged so deep inside him. But the sound of footsteps down the hall broke the moment. A teacher passed by, flicking the library lights once as a warning. Closing soon. Olivia's heart sank. She wanted to scream at the universe for interrupting. David shoved his papers into his bag, avoiding her eyes now. We'll finish this later. She reached out before she could stop herself, fingers brushing the edge of his sleeve. He froze. Her voice trembled. Don't run from this again. For a heartbeat, his arm stayed perfectly still under her touch. Then, slowly, he pulled away. That night, Olivia sat cross-legged on her bed, notebook open but blank. She tried to write out what had happened. The almost confession, the words that felt heavier than the silence. But all she could manage were half sentences. I wanted him to say it. He almost did. Why can't I let go? She shut the notebook and pressed it to her chest. Across town, David sat on the edge of his bed, his own notebook in hand. He stared at the page, then wrote 4 words before closing it. She still deserves better. The next time they met, the project deadline loomed. Neither of them mentioned the library moment, but it hung between them anyway, heavier than ever. And Olivia knew, with a certainty that scared her, that they were only inches from something breaking wide open. Chapter 12. When silence finally speaks. The Monday of presentation week dawned gray, the sky bruised with heavy clouds. Olivia pressed her forehead against the bus window, watching droplets slide across the glass. She should have been thinking about their project, about dates and sources and conclusions. Instead, all she could hear was his voice from the library. I've made mistakes, ones I don't get to take back. Those words had haunted her all weekend. By the time she got to school, her chest felt tight, like she'd been holding her breath since Friday. David was already in the classroom when she arrived, leaning back in his chair with his hood pulled low over his face. His notebook lay open in front of him, pen tapping rhythmically against the desk. He didn't look up when she sat down. She tried to focus on her own work, flipping through her notes, underlining lines she already knew by heart. But the weight of his silence pressed on her until she couldn't take it anymore. You ready? She asked, voice lower than usual. His pen stilled. He nodded once. Yeah. That was it. The simplicity of it made her want to scream. Their teacher assigned the order of presentations. They were third. The groups before them blurred together, their classmates' voices rising and falling without meaning. Olivia's pulse hammered louder than anything being said. When their turn came, she forced herself to stand, clutching her note cards like they were lifelines. David stood too, shoulders squared, but his eyes never met hers. They moved through the slides and practiced rhythm. She introduced the legislative impact. He picked up with the grassroots protests. They shifted back and forth, their voices blending into something almost seamless, at least to everyone else in the room. But to Olivia, every word felt jagged. Every pause stretched too long. Halfway through, she risked a glance at him. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight. When he caught her looking, he flicked his eyes away so quickly it hurt. Her throat burned, but she pushed through to the end. When they finished, polite applause filled the room. Their teacher smiled, said something about thorough research. Olivia forced a thank you. Then it was over, and nothing felt finished. They walked out of the classroom together, though together felt like a lie. David shoved his hands into his pockets, steps heavy. Olivia clutched her folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. At the corner of the hall, she stopped. Wait, she said. He froze but didn't turn. Her heart pounded. We need to talk. For a long second, he didn't move. Then he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. About what? Her voice cracked. About everything. They ended up outside beneath the awning near the back entrance. The air was sharp with the scent of wet asphalt, raindrops clinging to the edges of the concrete. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. You keep shutting me out, and I keep letting you. I can't keep doing that. David leaned against the wall, head tilted back, eyes closed like he was already exhausted. I told you, he said quietly. I've messed up. You don't need to carry that. Her chest ached. But I already am. That made him open his eyes, finally looking at her. There was something almost startled in his expression, like he hadn't realized the weight he'd placed on her shoulders. Olivia. No. Her voice rose, trembling but steady. You don't get to decide what I feel. You don't get to decide if I can handle it. You think you're protecting me, but you're just... She broke off, shaking her head, words tangling. You're just making it worse. Rain pattered harder on the awning above them. David's jaw worked, but he said nothing. The silence stretched, sharp as glass. Olivia's throat burned with frustration. Why won't you just tell me? What are you so afraid of? His hands curled into fists at his sides. Because once I say it, you'll look at me differently. Her breath caught. Maybe, but maybe I'll understand. He shook his head almost violently. You don't get it. Then make me get it. The words ripped out of her, louder than she intended. Stop hiding. Stop acting like I can't handle the truth. I'm not fragile. I'm not... Her voice cracked. I'm not leaving. That seemed to cut through him. His whole body went still, his fists loosening slowly. He looked at her then, really looked, like he was trying to decide if he could trust the ground beneath him. The rain grew heavier, blurring the edges of the world around them. Finally he spoke, voice raw. Fine. About 95% of the time, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to life. You've always been there to defend me, and that's been something that I've always appreciated. But I have never felt like I deserved. I'm telling you, I don't know what's going on in my head anymore. With you, with me, or with anything truly. His voice faltered. He swallowed hard. And so I run away from things and pretend that life is okay, even when it isn't. Because that's what I do. Olivia's breath shook. David. What? The words hit her like cold water, but it burned into her as well. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She hadn't realized how far this had gone and how she'd let it get this far. She wanted to reach across the space between them and take his hand, to tell him he wasn't as broken as he thought. Instead, she whispered, I'm here for you, like I always have been and always will be. So please, just let me. He flinched. I can't. Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, why not, and get all push harder, but she composed herself and remained quiet. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. David's eyes searched hers, stormy and uncertain. His lips parted like he might say something. Like he might go back on what he just said and finally let her back in. But then the school bell rang, shrill and jarring. He pushed off the wall, shoulders stiff. We should go. Olivia's heart sank. So that's it? He hesitated, rain dripping from the edge of his hood. Not a word followed. And then he walked away. That night, Olivia lay awake long past midnight, replaying every word, every pause, every look. Her notebook sat open beside her, blank pages begging to be filled. She scribbled furiously, sentences slanting across the paper. He let me see the edges, not the whole picture, but enough to know he's bleeding. Why do I still want to hold him together? Across town, David sat at his desk, notebook open, pen hovering. He wrote only one line before shutting it again. She deserves to hate me, but she doesn't. By Friday, the rain still hadn't stopped. The halls buzzed with weekend plans, laughter echoing off the lockers. Olivia moved through it all like she was underwater. She knew they weren't finished. Not even close. And deep down, she knew the next time they spoke, there would be no more sidestepping, no more almosts. The silence between them had finally cracked. Now, it was only a matter of time before it shattered completely. There was more to the story than just that. Chapter 13. The Quiet Between Us. The gym was almost empty by the time Olivia realized she'd been staring at the faded blue bleachers for half an hour. The volleyball team had finished practice, and the echo of bouncing balls and sneakers squeaking against the waxed floor had long since died away. Still, she sat there, backpack at her feet, hands folded in her lap, heart tangled in too many knots to pull apart. The past weeks had been heavy in a way that felt different than anything before. David hadn't just pulled away. He had vanished into himself. He sat at different lunch tables, found different hallways between classes, left school before she could catch him at his locker. When she did manage to corner him, all she got were quiet smiles, careful excuses, or a glance that never stayed on her long enough to mean anything. But she knew better. She knew the boy who grew up across the street, the boy who never once let her feel alone in her worst moments. And now here he was, convinced that he was the burden. It made her chest ache just thinking about it. Tonight, she couldn't take it anymore. She stood, slung her bag over her shoulder, and marched across the court, footsteps loud in the emptiness. She already knew where he would be. There was only one place left in the whole school where he thought no one would look for him. The music room. The door was cracked when she arrived, just enough for the faintest trickle of sound to slip out. Not singing, David didn't sing in front of anyone, but humming, soft and low, a thread of melody that floated on the air like it didn't need to prove itself. She pushed the door open quietly, letting the sound wash over her. David sat at the piano, headphones slung around his neck, fingers tapping out something raw and unfinished on the keys. His hair fell into his eyes, and when he looked up to see her there, his whole body froze. Olivia. His voice cracked just saying her name. What are you? You don't get to run from me anymore, she cut in, her voice sharp, even though her chest was trembling. She dropped her bag by the door and stepped further inside. I've given you weeks of silence, weeks of letting you avoid me, weeks of pretending I don't see what you're doing, and I can't. Not anymore. David's shoulders tightened. He looked back down at the keys, pressing one slowly, letting the note ring out. I thought it'd be easier this way. Easier for who? Olivia asked, her voice breaking on the word. His hand stilled on the piano. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of fluorescent lights above them. Then he drew in a shaky breath. For you. Her throat closed up, but she forced herself forward until she was standing right beside him. Say it, she demanded. He shook his head. Olivia, say it. Say why you've been treating me like I'm some stranger. His jaw tightened, and when he finally spoke, the words came out so low she almost didn't hear them. Because I'm holding you back. Her heart splintered at the sound of it. He went on before she could stop him. You've always been brighter, stronger. You walk into a room and people notice. You don't even try, and still everyone wants to be near you. And me? He laughed, but it was hollow. I've been the kid in your shadow since we were 5. I'm the one people make fun of, the one you always have to step in and protect. And I can't. His voice cracked, raw. I can't keep making you carry me. You deserve better than that. You deserve someone who makes you shine even more, not someone who makes people whisper about why you're wasting your time on him. Olivia couldn't breathe. Every word cut into her like glass, not because she believed them, but because he did. Because he had been sitting alone for weeks convincing himself of something so heartbreakingly wrong. She swallowed hard and reached for his wrist. His hand flinched, but she held on anyway, tight enough that he had to look at her. You don't get to decide what I deserve, she said, her voice fierce through the tears she didn't bother hiding. You don't get to erase yourself from my life because you've built up some story in your head about me outgrowing you. That's not your choice, David. That's mine. His eyes flickered, torn between disbelief and hope, but she pressed on. You think I care about whispers? About popularity? Her voice shook. The only thing I care about is the person who's been there every single day of my life. The person who sat with me when my mom left for work and I couldn't sleep. The person who ran across the street with soup when I got sick in middle school. The person who has always been there even when no one else noticed. She leaned down so her forehead almost touched his. The person I can't imagine my life without. That's you, David. It's always you. His eyes were wet now, the fight in him slipping away as he whispered, You don't mean that. Her laugh was choked and trembling. God, you're impossible. She cupped his face, made him look at her. Of course I mean it. I've been terrified of saying it, because what if I ruined everything? But watching you push me away has been worse than anything I could imagine. So here it is. I love you. I've loved you longer than I've even known what that word meant. It's so real and pure that it just felt like you and me against the world, and it took losing you, even if for a few days, for me to come to terms with my feelings. If you don't believe me, fine. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you because you're more than just a friend to me. Silence settled heavy between them, broken only by both their uneven breaths. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His fingers fidgeted with the strap of his hoodie, trembling ever so faintly. Silence stretched, heavy and fragile, until he finally exhaled, voice low and shaky. Olivia, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, she said gently, stepping closer. I just needed you to know. That's all. That I care too much to let you push me away. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden, but she didn't blink them back. She couldn't. Not when the truth had been held for so long, not when the quiet weeks had clarified everything she had tried to deny. David's gaze softened, a fragile mix of relief and guilt. He exhaled through his nose, shoulders slumping slightly. I didn't realize. I didn't know you felt like that. Olivia smiled through the tears, the tension in her chest easing just slightly. I've always felt like that, she admitted. I just didn't want to make things harder for you. But you see, David, you've already made my life better by being in it. I can't pretend I don't notice anymore. He swallowed, then nodded faintly, the walls he had built beginning to crack. I've been so scared, he confessed, voice low, almost a whisper. Scared I'd mess things up. Scared I'd hold you back. But hearing you, I think I understand now. Olivia reached out slowly, brushing a hand against his. The contact was light, tentative, but it sent a warmth coursing through both of them. We're stronger together, she said softly. I get you and you get me. That's how it should be. His fingers twined with hers, hesitant but deliberate. The week of silence, the tension, the guilt. It all seemed to converge in this single, fragile moment of connection. Then David's hands finally lifted, trembling, and rested against hers where she held his face. His voice was barely more than a whisper. I love you too. It was fragile, like he was scared the words might break if he said them louder. But then he said it again, stronger this time, like he was finally letting it out after years of holding it in. I love you too, Olivia. And then he kissed her. It wasn't perfect. Their noses bumped. Their tears got in the way. But it was real. It was everything that had been building between them for years, breaking open all at once. When they finally pulled back, Olivia was laughing through her tears, forehead pressed against his. You're such an idiot. David let out a shaky laugh of his own. Yeah, but I'm your idiot. The weight between them, all those weeks of silence and guilt, finally cracked apart. And in its place was something new, something that had always been there waiting for them to name it. They sat together on the piano bench, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, the quiet between them no longer heavy, but whole. For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt like she could breathe again. And for the first time in his life, David believed he was exactly where he belonged. Thanks for listening. Stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next story.